Okay, so I know I'm a little late to this whole Spider-Man party, but there's a good reason for that. You know how everyone was complaining about the puddles in Spider-Man weren't as realistic as they wanted them to be? Well, for me, the puddles were a little bit too realistic.
Flooded completely. I don't know if you can see how much water is in here, but it's a lot.
So yeah, maybe I'm late because my house flooded, or maybe I'm just channeling my inner Peter Parker. You know how he's always late for everything? I'm late for this video.
Parker, you're late, man. Always late.
But maybe the third reason I'm late is because I was busy doing this. I 100%ed this game for the video. Actually, I 100%ed this game for me. I usually don't go out of my way to 100% video games, but in the case of Spider-Man on PlayStation 4, I just couldn't help myself. So move over, Gerard. I'm the new completionist. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna call Gerard and let him know how much better I completed this game than he did.
What's up, Wood?
Hey, Gerard. I just want to let you know that I completed Spider-Man as well.
That's great, man. I'm really happy for you, but
But
I don't
actually,
really have
I did it better than you.
You did it better? What does that even mean?
I love you.
What?
I give that phone call my completionist rating of embarrassed. So I'm sure by this point, y'all have heard a lot of great things about this game. But again, I couldn't not do my review on it. And the reason for that is Spider-Man games hold a very special place in my heart. These games were an integral part of my childhood and what helped form and shape me as a video gamer. And I have been waiting, begging, and pleading the gaming industry to make a Spider-Man game that was even half as good as the Spider-Man game we got in 2004. Spider-Man 2, the movie game. It seems crazy that that Spider-Man game has been on that pedestal, a shining example of what a Spider-Man game should be. And here we are, 14 years later, and only now getting something that may rival it in quality. So how does this Spider-Man truly stack up to the Spider-Man games of the past? To answer that question, we need to really quickly go back to the year 2000. The Spider-Man game that was released on PlayStation 1 in the year 2000 wasn't by any means the first Spider-Man game. In fact, before that one, there was about 15 other Spider-Man titles. But what this Spider-Man game did was introduce a lot of the gameplay mechanics that would become the foundation for what is an amazing Spider-Man game. You could really, for the first time, web-sling your way through a city, albeit a very light version of what we're used to now. You couldn't actually land on the city streets, you were tied to the rooftops, and the swinging mechanics weren't really all that fleshed out. You just shot your web straight up into the clouds, attached to make-believe buildings that weren't actually there. You didn't have to worry about it. It was the year 2000. You don't think of those kind of things. You just swing through the city. But for the year 2000, it actually had pretty decent combat, some fun missions, and a relatively enjoyable story. And then in 2002, we got Spider-Man the movie, the game. This kicked off a trilogy of games, each of which coincided with its respective Raimi Spider-Man movie of the time. And back in the day, I really enjoyed this one. It felt like the 2000 PlayStation 1 Spider-Man I had just played, but with a fresh coat of paint. It certainly expanded on the city tops, giving you more room to swing in. Different shirt. Then, in 2004, on Xbox, PlayStation 2, and GameCube, we got Spider-Man 2, the movie game. So many people praised this game, and if you haven't played it or you don't understand looking at it where the praise is coming from, it truly was from the swinging mechanics. Of course, there was more that went into making it an amazing game. The cinematics were on par with the Raimi movies that were being released at the same time. They were absolutely gorgeous. I remember the one scene where Dr. Octavius becomes Doc Ock. It's burnt into my brain because it was so high quality and epic. And opening it up to become a sandbox game blew my mind when I was 14 years old. It was such a huge upgrade and insane to me at the time. I really felt like I was Spider-Man in New York doing Spider-Man things. And that swinging mechanic, a swinging mechanic so beautifully crafted that no other Spider-Man game managed to come close for 14 freaking years. And it wasn't just the fact that they spent time working on the physics of the game and making sure that you actually had to attach onto buildings if you wanted to swing, but it was the fact that left trigger shot a web from your left arm and right trigger shot a web from your right arm. The creative control that gave you as Spider-Man in New York City, that is how to make a Spider-Man game. Something as simple as giving you that left and right control led to you being able to play any way you wanted. Everything else about the game was decent or good, but the swinging in Spider-Man 2 was amazing. And then we moved on to Spider-Man 3, the movie game, which again was based on the Spider-Man 3 movie that was released around the same time. In this game, they improved some things. The swinging was pretty much left untouched because why mess with greatness? Unfortunately, the story in this game was very lackluster, and once again, the best part of this Spider-Man game was the swinging. It's always the swinging. And after that, sadly, rather than improving every Spider-Man game, they just seem to keep getting worse. The Amazing Spider-Man game, a tie-in to the Amazing Spider-Man movie, was released in 2012, and in my personal opinion, they completely botched the swinging mechanic. In this game, they dumbed everything down to one button, the right trigger. You just hold that bad boy down and swing your way through the city. You don't even have to release it at any point. And it strips out everything that made the previous Spider-Man movie tie-in games actually really enjoyable. And not only did they dumb it down so much that you had to hold the right trigger, but they even completely ruined the flow of Spider-Man, and it heavily relied on you having to slow down time, pretty much stop time while swinging, pick where you want to go, and Spidey-Man just auto-zips to that point. In the exact place that's supposed to be the smoothest, most organic, flowing, and enjoyable part of the game to play, it pulls that handbrake and just does it for you. But the worst, most criminally offensive thing this game did was took it back to the year 2000, where you didn't have to even attach onto a building. They simplified it so much that the web shot straight up into the sky again. And I think it went beyond trying to simplify a game and make it easily accessible to everyone. I think it just went into being lazy. You know how hard it is to actually build a realistic swinging mechanic in a video game? You not only have to worry about where the webs are going to go, and you don't want them to shoot off in random different places and confuse the gamer and make it impossible to swing around the city, you want the webs to hit exactly where the gamer thinks they are going to hit when they throw the web out. And then you have to worry about momentum and the physics behind the entire game. You have to make it all flow and look stylish and realistic and feel great. But in this game, they were like, yeah, we can't be bothered doing any of that. The movie comes out soon, we better hurry. Swing straight up into the sky and hold that right trigger. Around that, the game wasn't too bad. They kind of stole everything that made the Batman Arkham series great and just put them into this game. It was essentially just Spider-Man Arkham City with an okay story and terrible web swinging mechanics. And then in 2014, to tie in to the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie, we got a game based on that movie. And I will say this about the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie, the game. They did the swinging right in this one. It was the best swinging we have seen since Spider-Man 2. They brought back the left and right swing. You actually had to hit buildings. Momentum played a huge part in how you swung through the game. And even though Spider-Man looked a little stiff while he was swinging through the city, they still tried to add some of that signature Spider-Man style to it. The twists, the turns, the flips, the kinds of things that makes you feel like Spider-Man. The rest of the game was just eh. From 1989 up until this point in 2014, Spider-Man games were being released almost non-stop, several a year it seemed like. And while I have been purely focusing on the sandbox, open world, story-driven, swinging around the city games to get to this point, there were a ton of other Spider-Man games released between the ones I talked about. I enjoyed some of them, I hated others, but for the most part, again, none came close to the 2004 Spider-Man 2. And then after 2014, there's silence. There was nothing. There wasn't a single Spider-Man game. No one wanted to touch it at that point. In fact, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game sold so poorly and had such a low production run that right now on Amazon it's like $130. It's quite expensive because no one bought it. And then this year, after 18 years of Spider-Man games in my life, and it's been 14 years since I played one that I would say is truly great. How does Spider-Man for PlayStation 4 stack up to all those other failed attempts and the couple of really great ones? Let's get the only negative thing I have to say about the game out of the way first. And to do that, it seemed fitting. You still can't press the left trigger to swing with the left arm. That would have made this game perfect for me. But that's just me, and I can't take my own personal opinion that much to heart to dock points from the game. But despite my own personal preference as to what a Spider-Man swinging mechanic should be, this was the next best thing. They nailed swinging in Spider-Man. Everything I talked about that the previous games did right, this game did better. I know this line is a meme and it started back with Batman, but if you truly want to feel like Spider-Man, this game does it 100%. So with that being said, let's finally talk about all the amazing things in this Spider-Man game. Spider-Man on PlayStation 4 feels like the sequel to Spider-Man 2 we never got. And yes, it has 14 years worth of improvements to it. They've gone from 0 to 100 in this game. There's so many parts of that Spider-Man 2 game that's carried over to this game, and I love it. Like being able to charge up your jump, shooting straight up into the clouds, into the birds, and start swinging along the New York City skyline. Running straight up those buildings and then catapulting off the other side, plummeting down into the streets of New York, swinging last second, and then deciding how you want to swing, where you want to go, what building you want to swing off of. Once you master these controls, you always know where your web is gonna land. You always know where your swing is going to take you. And once you start diving into your upgrades and improving your swinging mechanics just like you could back in Spider-Man 2, you'll be zipping around the city faster than ever before. In a Spider-Man game, the city should be your playground. It should feel like a friggin' Tony Hawk game, but with webs rather than wheels. And when you start getting good at it, that's truly what it becomes. And pulling off those combinations of wall running, web zipping, flips and tricks, and web slinging all the way up into the clouds, it feels fantastic. And it's something that I can sit doing for hours and hours and hours. And that's purely the reason I 100% of the game, is because I didn't want to stop web slinging, and there was so much to do while I was roaming the streets of New York. I just kept doing it all, and then I found myself at 100%. But that's enough about swinging. There is a lot more to this game that I want to touch on as quick as I can. To start with, there's constant dialogue. When you're swinging around the city, it isn't just empty silence. You do have an amazing Spider-Man soundtrack that kickstarts every single time you start swinging. That music will start building and building and building as you rocket towards the ground. They timed it perfectly to make it feel like you're playing the movie. And with the dialogue between Spider-Man's one-liners and observations as he's roaming around the city, to Yuri, Mary Jane, Aunt May, or Miles, or one of the several characters in this game calling Spider-Man and having conversations with him as he swings around, NPC characters or enemies on the streets having their conversations, or even J. Jonah Jameson's talk show, which it plays several episodes of not only while you're completing the game, but then even after the game. And a little detail they did that I really appreciate is when Spider-Man is swinging around having these conversations with people over the phone in his Spidey suit, they had the voice actor record two different versions of each line. One where you can tell he was clearly swinging and struggling to talk as he swung, and then one just clear talking like I am right now. And then it plays whichever version depending on if you're swinging or not.
Peter, hey, can I call you back?
I think you'll want to hear this. Wait, why are you whispering?
Peter, hey, can I call you back?
I think you'll want to hear this. Wait, why are you whispering?
How about we catch up over dinner? My place?
Oh, sure. I'll even cook.
How about we catch up over dinner? My place?
Oh, sure. I'll even cook.
The city is absolutely gorgeous. Everything we saw about the game leading up to its release didn't do it justice. It's not until you sit down with a controller in your hand on a 4K TV and see this city for yourself and start swinging through it and exploring it, do you realize how gorgeous this game is. There's 3 times of day in the game. There's daytime, evening, and night. I think evening is by far my favorite time of day to swing around the city. Absolutely breathtaking. The way the sun pours in through the buildings as you're swinging through them, or the way the sun reflects on the water as you're swinging past the harbor. Oh, and beyond looking like a realistic city, it actually looks like a realistic New York. I've been to New York a few times now and I absolutely love the place. It's one of my favorite places to visit in America. And I've tried to explore New York as much as possible and visit as many cool places as possible. So swinging around New York and starting to recognize the places I've been was actually pretty cool. From Rockefeller Center to Central Park and Times Square, it was awesome visiting these places that I've been in real life, but in the game. Also in Central Park, you can find that bridge that Mary Jane dumped Spider-Man on in the Raimi movies. Yeah, and you can try and pick up chicks. Unsuccessfully, of course, but I love that you can do the Spider-Man fingers from the third movie. I had a lot of fun doing that. The amount of different Spidey suits you can unlock in this game was such a nice touch. And the Spider-Man universe between the comic books, the TV show, the movies, all of that, there are so many fantastic outfits to choose from. I love the suit they made for the game with the white trims and the giant white spider on the back. But the two I played with the most was the suit from Homecoming, the one that Tony Stark gave Peter Parker in the movie. Just because I love that classic Spider-Man look, it's so sleek. But then my other favorite had to be the cel-shaded comic book Spider-Man suit. I feel like that was fanfare on two levels. One, obviously the comic book fans, and two, the Ultimate Spider-Man fans. A game I didn't get to touch on earlier, Ultimate Spider-Man, that was also on Xbox, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. It was pretty much Spider-Man 2, but the comic book version, and it was fantastic. So those were my favorites, but of course there are so many suits to choose from. Obviously, I don't want to ruin too much about the movie. I don't want to go into the entire story. I will say that I didn't expect to be in tears at the end, but I very almost was. So obviously, I really enjoyed the story. I know I keep saying that, hey, it makes you feel like you're in the movie, but there's a reason why they called it Marvel Spider-Man. It really does tie into the universe that they're creating right now. And not just because you can find places like where Doctor Strange lives, or the Avengers Tower, or where Matt Murdock practices law, but because of everything I talked about so far, and the scope and the quality of the story, it may as well just be a Marvel movie. You can cut out the cinematics, slap it together, and watch it just like the Marvel movies we've been getting lately, and it would be pretty much the same quality and as interesting. Bringing in so many iconic villains from Spider-Man was an incredible idea, but then taking one lesser known villain in Martin Lee and focusing more on him, it was easy to jump cold straight into the Spider-Man story and be very familiar with everything that's going on, but then experience the newer, fresher elements of this story and be excited and confused with Peter Parker as he goes on a new adventure with familiar faces. I can't ask for anything more for this game. They gave me exactly what I've wanted for the last 14 years, and I am dying for a sequel and to see how they improve this game and make it better next time. I'm losing my mind at theories. Speaking of spoilers, the game's been out long enough now. There's a couple of things I want to really quickly touch on, including 100%ing the game, and the very last achievement I got. I want to share that with you guys because I think it's pretty funny. So if you want to avoid any kind of spoilers, I recommend clicking to this part of the video. I loved that they introduced Miles into this story and then had his origin story throughout Spider-Man's story. That was freaking fantastic. It was such a great idea. And then that final scene of having them both flip up into the ceiling and seeing the two Spider-Men. Now imagine a sequel with both of these Spider-Men working hand in hand to save the city, and you could play with a friend co-op in New York City. I don't know how everyone's gonna feel about that, but for me, I would absolutely love it to swing around a city with someone else. So as I said, I 100%ed this game, and I also got all the trophies and platinum the game. Throughout this review, you may have noticed that I really like the swinging mechanic, and I really stressed that as the most important part, which is why I found it pretty humorous as to what was the last trophy in the game I had to unlock. So let me share with you my moment getting my final trophy. New York so much, I not only forgot there was a fast travel option, but whenever I remembered, I refused to use it. Why? Why would I fast travel? Why would I take the subway when I'm Spider-Man? So apart from the obvious somewhat obsession with web slinging in Spider-Man games, the reason why this game and Spider-Man 2 was so important to me, it's because in a weird way, These games have been there for me when I needed them. I know that sounds weird, and I don't want to dive into it too much and bring the whole video down, but I've talked about in the past my depression and my anxiety, and that started when I was really young. I talk about swinging in Spider-Man 2 and how relaxing it was for me at the time with my anxiety building up. Even though at the time I didn't really understand or appreciate that fact, I just knew that I loved swinging in Spider-Man. It really was my escape. And it's kind of ironic in a way that we finally get another Spider-Man game that does that right, and it releases at the perfect time for me. I went and picked this game up the same day my house flooded, during one of the worst times of my life, when for a few days I couldn't even play the game I just picked up. But when I could play it, when I got in this Airbnb, set up my TV, my PlayStation, and started playing it, and fall in love with Spider-Man games all over again. 14 years later, and in a weird way, Spider-Man games are still helping me cope with difficult situations. So that's my history with Spider-Man games, and my review on the new Spider-Man for PlayStation 4, and why, in my opinion, Insomniac Games just created the best Spider-Man game. And there was a lot of competition. Not good competition, just a lot of it. For me, this is one of them dream come true moments when a game you really, really want to be made actually gets made after years of waiting. So seriously, thank you, Insomniac Games. Thank you. And also, thank you to Gerard the Completionist for helping me with that stupid little skit at the start of this video. And thank you to you guys for watching this video. And hey, if you liked this video or you learned a little something, make sure you subscribe because I'd really appreciate it and we become best friends. Click or tap on this video right here because it probably has better puddles than this one did. Anyone notice that I wore red and white like the Spider-Man outfit? It was intentional. I don't know if you noticed. All right, see ya.